Hello students, I want to welcome you to our inaugural video for Theory of the Firm. The first chapter for this topic, chapter 16 in Archer Degay's book, concerns itself with production, costs, revenues, and profit, and we're going to look at some diagrams that help us to relate to these concepts. The first thing that we're going to want to note is that businesses are interested in using their resources, their inputs, as productively as possible. This helps them to keep their costs low, it helps them to maximize their output. When we consider how businesses are using their resources, we focus on time period. In other words, are they in the short run or the long run? When we're looking at the short run, that means that we're looking at a period of time during which at least one of the inputs that they're using is fixed and that it cannot be changed by the firm. We can think of things like buildings or heavy machinery where it might take a year or more for them to acquire these resources. So in the short run, we have the things that we sort of insert into the building. We insert ingredients into the heavy machinery. We might insert metals. We might insert wheat to make cereal. But we don't actually change the sort of component building itself. That takes time to construct. On the other end of the spectrum is our long run, and this is the period of time where all inputs can be changed. In other words, all inputs become variable. Now, the topic of discussion for this video, our idea of total product, average product, and marginal product, we're generally focused on the short run. In the long run, all of those variable inputs are combined with other variable inputs. In the long run, everything is variable. However, in the short run, we're adding these variable inputs to some form of fixed input, such as a factory. So at the most basic level, it stands to reason that if we increase our inputs, then we should get more output. The more ingredients we use, the more final product we would expect to see. That's what our total product curve is going to represent, at least initially. Our total product is the quantity of output that is simply produced by a firm when it combines its resources, its factors of production. Now, the diagram that we see here from the Degay's book reflects this increasing total product. We see from our origin of zero, that our total product curve increases. Now, the exception to this is at the end of our total product curve, as we increase our variable input, in this case labor, when we're adding more workers, we eventually do actually suffer from a fall off in our total output, which is represented on this vertical axis. The reason for this is actually derived from our marginal product curve. We have to understand that in between, when we're adding each worker, how much additional benefit are they bringing to the firm? So this new diagram we see here reflects the marginal product curve as well as the average product curve. Notice that for both of these curves, we have an initial rise followed by a fall. Going from one worker up to two workers actually has an increasing marginal product. We see that represented by this dashed line where the separation exists. Followed by our fourth worker, from our fourth to fifth worker, we start to see a falling marginal product. Now, it's important to note that if we look at the total product curve above, we still have increasing output at this point, but it's increasing at a decreasing rate. Finally, at 9 units of variable input, we see that our marginal product crosses through zero, and it's actually going to become negative for each additional worker that we add beyond this point. This has to do with the diminishing return from adding additional employees, that eventually our kitchen is going to become so crowded that workers are bumping into each other, that they make each other essentially less productive, that will finally lose output in terms of our total product curve. Let's take a moment to simply define our marginal product and our average product. When we talk about marginal product, we're talking about adding an additional output resulting, or rather the additional output that's derived resulting from one additional unit of the variable input of labor. Average product, which we also see superimposed onto the same diagram, is the total quantity of output per unit of variable input, how much output each unit of labor produces. The main difference is that for the average, all the workers essentially have the same output. When we're thinking about the marginal, it's the additional output brought by the additional worker. So let's consider an example. Let's consider a pizza shop. Mr. Silverman is opening a pizza restaurant called Mr. S's Pizza Pies. and I'm determining how many workers I should have in order to sort of maximize my output. So when I have 0 workers, it stands to reason that I have 0 pizzas, and that's reflected that our total product curve starts at our origin. No workers, no pizzas. But as I add my first worker, now they're capable of using my fixed capital, such as my pizza oven. That worker can put together ingredients, themselves being essentially a factor of production, and create 5 pizzas. The marginal product of that first worker is like, what did they add to this whole scheme? They added 5 pizzas themselves. When I add one more worker, so as we go from 1 to 2, we all of a sudden have 10 more pizzas being produced. My total product of pizzas is 15 pizzas. By adding the second worker, in this case, I've actually more than doubled the output of pizzas. I gain 10 pizzas. The first worker, I gain 5 pizzas. The second worker, I gain 10 pizzas. So the marginal product of the second worker is 10. For my third worker, I'm still increasing my total product. That's just my pizza column. I go from 15 pizzas to 19 pizzas. But I have a diminishing return from adding additional labor. My third worker only produces an additional 4 pizzas. That's less than my first worker. It's less than my second worker. Now I'm still seeing an increase in total product, but we have that diminishing marginal return. For my fourth my fourth worker, we actually reduce the total product. And here is where we would see the marginal product curve moving through 0 such that it becomes negative. Here, so many workers are actually harming my ability to produce pizzas. They're burning themselves. They're bumping into each other. They're causing problems. I should have never added that fourth worker in the first place. So what these diagrams then help us to understand is about marginal productivity of a variable input. We typically think of labor when we think of a general input. The marginal productivity of labor is indicating how efficient an additional worker can be. We see that we have at first increasing marginal product, then decreasing marginal product, and finally a negative marginal product. In other words, a law of diminishing returns essentially states that at first it will increase, and then at a point our marginal productivity will decrease. Note that both marginal product and average product are both calculations that we can make. That's how we derive the marginal product column of our table here. So our marginal product has to do with the change. As we add a worker, as we change the units of labor, what is the change to our total product, either an increase or a decrease? So marginal product is equal to the change of total product divided by the change in the units of labor. For our average product, we simply take the total product and we divide by however many units of labor we have, such that we get a per unit total average. So some final notes on our average product and marginal product curve specifically. We want to make sure that we understand that at first, we have this increasing marginal product. Our average product is also increasing. In fact, our average product will always be increasing as long as the marginal product is increasing. Where we see these two curves intersect is at the maximum of the average product curve. Essentially, what's going to occur is as soon as marginal product begins to fall, average product will actually trail that fall in the marginal product. This makes sense in that if the next worker results in fewer pizzas, he's going to bring down the average for the whole group. Finally, we have a law that sort of ties this all together with a pretty bow. We don't have many laws in economics. This is one of the few ones that's going to hold true for our particular unit on theory of the firm, and this is called the law of diminishing returns. Previously, we've noted how marginal benefit curves essentially have diminishing returns in that our satisfaction is reduced, let's say, when we eat additional slices of cake. At first, I find additional benefit in the next slice of cake, but eventually I get kind of queasy. And it's the same for businesses as they add their variable inputs, in this case, as we've been using labor. So as more units of the variable input are added to one or more fixed inputs, the marginal product of the variable input at first increases, and that's the shape of our marginal product curve as well as our average product curve, and then at a point begins to decrease. In other words, the meaning of this in layman's terms is that more and more variable inputs are going to be added to a fixed input, and eventually they'll sort of crowd each other out. We don't have additional pizza parlors to move these people to and continue to increase the output of our pizza firm. If we're thinking the long run, yeah, I want to franchise, I want to expand my business, I'll open new locations, but that takes quite a bit of time. So this is a consequence within the short run. And those diagrams that we looked at relate to our short run.